few weeks ago, Dina, Scott and I held information sessions with people from around the world who are curious about the kind of product that we're building with Kiraa. I know a lot of people on the channel also want me to talk more about the Kiraa solution, and I'm happy to do that. But to do it properly, we need to take a step back and look at this from first principles. You see, the problem we have today is that the big AI tech companies are making all kinds of assumptions around AI and large language models that we don't believe are true. And that means if I simply show you Kiraa without explaining why it's fundamentally different, you're going to be left with the wrong impression. But the concepts are pretty simple once I explain them. And so in order to give you the full picture, I've cut down one of those briefing sessions to share more broadly on YouTube. This is still 45 minutes long, and it's not the normal 7-minute that I like to produce, but I know many of you are curious and would like to learn more, which is why we've uploaded this for you today. Excellent, great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us today. This is just a session we've organised for you to meet the founders of Kiraa. You've probably heard a lot about me or from me on the Kiraa YouTube channel, and a lot of that is just about general business and AI stuff that I rant about, but this is more about building or explaining or sharing what we're building, and not just the product, but also the community of the people who believe in the kind of future that we do. I'd like to make this as interactive as possible. So I've got Dina, my co-founder, here with me, as you probably already know from the emails, and also our CEO, Scott Thompson, here. And Dina or Scott will also talk about their parts of the business. And the three of us have worked together now for about 15 years. And we were all involved in one of Australia's most successful manufacturing turnarounds. We joined a business that was losing, or Dina was already there, but I joined and Scott joined a business that was losing $45 million a year, just about $1 million a week. And over the sort of the next 3 years, we turned that into a $35 million profit. And I'll also say that sort of the reason why we're here today is because around 10 years ago, inside that business, Dina, Scott and I lost a colleague who was working in that business with us together. He died suddenly, and we just didn't realize how much knowledge was locked up inside his brain. It was particularly challenging for me because he reported to me, and I discovered that the entire company's budgeting system was run on 37 linked spreadsheets, and nobody knew how they worked. So it took us about 3 years and more than $1 million to recreate all those spreadsheets and that knowledge. And that sort of got me thinking about what I need to put in place to stop that sort of catastrophic loss of corporate knowledge from happening again. So that's really the origin story behind Kiraa. But it's also something I've been thinking about for a long time. My background is in leading analytics teams for companies, for manufacturing companies like Nestle and Amcor. And I've always been frustrated by how hard it is to get basic analytics back to the business so business leaders could make high quality decisions. So if you sort of boil it down, the objective of Kiraa really is to help employees inside companies make better decisions faster so we can lift productivity. I'll introduce you to Dina, my co-founder. Dina's an amazing machine in driving process improvement, and she's been leading customer experience teams for decades, and she really brings the customer lens to everything that we do. So Dina, I'll get you to introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for joining. So my background is in customer support and sales areas, and particularly focused on developing and bringing on teams, setting up processes. So I love the documentation, the process, the organization. So my part in Kiraa is around the governance side, making sure we're doing all the right things, making sure we have the right processes in place, the right people in place, and trying to organise Errol a little bit is a part of a full-time role there. But as you know, Errol is very busy, so I take on a lot of that kind of administrative and governance side of the business, but do come from a background of that really strong processes and setting those up to support customers and make sure that we delight customers. And that's kind of my side of the business. And you would see Megan on the call, but Megan is our general manager, and she works closely with me around that whole customer support piece. Scott?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Scott Thompson. As Errol outlined, I've worked with Dina and Errol for a while now, last 15 odd years, thereabouts. I've got 30 years leadership experience in running businesses, generally in the FMCG area. Businesses that have been global, Middle East, as well, Australia and New Zealand. So ASX, privately owned, private equity, but also on the stock market elsewhere. Over that time, I've had the pleasure of leading those businesses to up to 2,000 employees, 74 different locations, well over 1,000 customers. But I've also been involved in acquisitions, right-sizing organizations, bringing them through from different markets into new market opportunities. And a key component of that has also been startup to the growth stage through to the acquisition stage over time. I'm a builder of businesses to build people, and a key element of what we're doing here is building a business and to support people to actually make their days a lot more effective. In the last decade, IT spend has really exploded. The pink line sort of shows you that explosion. Investment has grown significantly over that time. The green line is the productivity line. And essentially, it's been pretty straight. Now, this is from an Australian perspective in regards to the data source from the Reserve Bank and also the Productivity Commission. But everything we look at elsewhere around the world has a similar aspect around IT spend climbing significantly, but the return from a productivity perspective isn't moving so fast. So when the AI wave arrived, the industry said, it's different and it's time. Hopefully this will move the green line. So unfortunately, the green line really hasn't moved. Business expected AI to drive productivity, but to date, the results are somewhat disappointing. And again, from source, 95% of AI projects have not provided any value at this point in time. And based on the research, it's outlining that 40% of those will be abandoned by 2027. Two different studies measuring two different things, and you can argue the methodology on both, but you don't really need to win that argument. You just need to go and talk to CEOs or CFOs who funded AI pilot projects over the last 2 years and ask them what it returned. You'll get the same answer that the research is actually sharing with you. The interesting bit, the failure isn't because of the models, and it's not failure because they're bad. The models are actually extraordinary. The failure is structural. It's in how that they're being sold and delivered to those businesses. So, as we've spoken about, the cloud AI has failed to deliver affordable, reliable, and safe productivity improvements. The token costs are an unknown. There are many articles around now where CEOs, CFOs are now coming to the realization that their future costs are things they don't really understand in this area. I've built a number of budgets over my time, and not once have I taken a budget to a board or a CEO to actually outline that there's an uncapped future cost. And there's no way in the world that boards that I've worked with would approve those uncapped future costs.
So look, the last few years we've spent hours and hours talking to customers about, what I thought a Kiraa solution could look like, what it would take to accelerate decision making, what it would take to move the dial in productivity. And I kept on hearing this word come up around sovereign AI. And the funny thing is, we've been told for years that everybody loves the cloud, but every time I talk to customers, they don't love the cloud. They find it convenient, but there's this growing suspicion and probably even now distrust of the cloud, not just because of the cost and the lock-in, but people are really starting to get worried that whose models are they training? What information am I giving to these hyperscalers for them to train their models on, to train my competitors on? So people are getting really quite concerned about going beyond what the cloud was originally for, which was really just data storage. Now it's become part of the business infrastructure, which we don't control. So people are getting really worried about what the future might look like if all we ever do is rent technology off people. So the Kiraa solution for me is directly looking at addressing sovereign AI and with an affordable, reliable, and safe insights. And on the right-hand side there's a little chart that I put up that Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, talked about, and he made a very good point, even though he's quite a divisive figure. His point was always that if you want to have value out of AI, you need to own the hardware, the software, the model, and the intelligence. You can't be renting those various components, because if you want a business asset, you need to control that asset. So any of those elements that you rent, you're potentially on the other side of the equation in terms of someone taking things away from you that you rely on from your business processes. So the Kiraa solution is about running on hardware that you control, and because it's on hardware that you control, it's vastly cheaper than cloud AI. You know, if you look at comparable workloads to running something that we do every hour, it could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on cloud. But when you buy something like a Mac Studio and you just turn it on and you run it, it's a fixed cost and it's drawing electricity, which is no more than a toaster, right? So the unit economics of having things on device are vastly cheaper than things in the cloud. But the other thing we also noticed is these days with the models coming out so quickly, and we saw this with Fable actually. So the weekend after Fable was pulled, we got absolutely inundated with requests, because for the first time people realized that someone could just pull the plug and they've written all their business processes around a model, and somebody can just decide you don't get that anymore. So we got everyone around the world said, how do I future-proof my business so that, you know, suddenly someone doesn't decide that I can't have that anymore. So we saw a lot of interest in on-device AI simply because we couldn't trust what was going to happen tomorrow. And the third big area that we've noticed is around the sovereignty. So particularly regulated industries, government, anywhere there's intellectual property, people are really getting worried about. Now that the government has changed their regulations around training, they're seeing this as a security threat. All of the prompts that we put in are being cataloged and indexed, and people are saying, who's doing what with this data? What are we teaching them? I'm not sure I want all of my commercial intellectual property going into a training model. So a lot of these things are really coming to the fore now, and it wasn't the problem that we originally intended to solve, but as we talk to customers, this sovereign AI concept has just become loud and clear. That's exactly what the market really wants. Now, obviously, you can say that the hardware can't do that. And up until now, that's been true. But certainly, as the more I talk to Apple, the more I realize that they understand that they're going to be leading the charge out of the cloud onto device. And the product pipeline they've come up with is really around leveraging higher and higher RAM so they can run bigger and bigger models. And the underlying unified memory architecture really lends itself to running AI, certainly smaller and bespoke models, not necessarily the frontier models. That's not really the purpose of what Apple's trying to do, but they're trying very much at creating bespoke AI solutions that run on device. And they've been the custodians of user privacy for a long time now. So they see that this concept of sovereignty is not just a personal thing, it's also a business thing. So I feel like they're moving a lot more of their interest back into the enterprise space, where they really haven't been for a long time. And certainly the hardware advances they've made with the unified memory and the series chip really support on-device AI in a way that simply wasn't possible a few years ago. Just on the page there, I've got a couple of screenshots about what the Kiraa product looks like. Essentially, it consists of a back end, which we call the engine, and a front end, which we call the platform. So the engine is where the secret sauce lives. I've just got a little bit of visual there of a vector cloud, and that represents the knowledge that's been trained into this engine. It looks a little bit like a brain when you animate it, and that's kind of where we got the idea of Kiraa being a business brain, because as you build up more and more knowledge, you start to see something that looks like a brain emerge. It's really quite interesting. The second screenshot is an example of the platform where users go and interact with their personalized actionable insights. So every person in the organization gets their own insights. It could be refreshed daily or weekly, whatever it is. But what that means is they're not wading through tens of dashboards and reports. We simply aggregate and summarize all the information that's relevant to their role in the one place. And then the third part of that is around the AI reasoning part, which allows users to ask questions and get advice about what to do with the information. So essentially what we're trying to answer is what's happening. So we take the signals from the enterprise data, we put them all together, we build up that knowledge repository, we then explain why it's happening. And then the third part is what we do next about it. What should I do? What's the right way to approach this? How can I think of this? So that's where users will interact with Kiraa and get all of the information they need for their role, but then also say, well, what do I need to do about it? How do I approach this? What can I, what does a training plan look like? So essentially, when you put all this together, what the problem we're trying to do is solve that problem of knowledge loss. So when we design these solutions, we work very closely with the business to understand what decisions every person needs to make and what information they require. And then we go out and configure the pipelines to present them in a way that makes sense. So that in terms of the productivity, our productivity feedback comes directly from the users. Are they able to make the decisions they need to do their job effectively right away? Or are they still having to go to 5 different screens and 3 different dashboards? So our measure of success is, are the users going back and finding this as their source of truth to help them do their roles effectively?
And what we do try and do there too is that try and set up as many predefined prompts as we can, so that we know for the sales team, they might be looking at certain areas. So prepare me for a customer visit, which of my products are losing money. The sales management team, it might be preparing for one-on-ones with their sales team, or looking at what's happening across segments. So we can predefine those so that it makes it even easier for the user to use the Kiraa intelligence and be able to get that information consistently. Talking about customers, OG is where we started, and we delivered sales intelligence to OG. OG are a manufacturing company. They have recently been bought out by the Abbey Group. And so one of our initial challenges was to also convince Abbey that the sales intelligence was a product worth using. And thankfully, they agreed and signed a 2-year contract with an additional 3-year option on that. So our proof point right at the start has been quite successful. So OG and Abbey are industrial manufacturers. They're very kind of ordinary companies, manufacturing companies in Australia. So they're not technology companies. They're not early AI adopters. They're businesses that have ERP system, a reasonably dodgy CRM system, lots of spreadsheets, sales teams that are under pressure, low margins. They really need to make the most out of their sales efforts. And so sales intelligence has really helped them do that. But they're an entirely kind of normal manufacturing company in Australia. The challenge for them was that their insights were buried for at least the first 2 weeks of every month. So this is talked about, Rhiannon, you talked about that 0-day month-end close that we were able to achieve for them. So the data existed for them, but it sat in a whole lot of different systems. They didn't talk to each other, those systems. And the sales team ended up doing their own kind of analyst work instead of being out in front of customers selling. So by the time they found those insights and understood what was happening, it was often too late to make any change to the outcome. So I've kind of spent my whole career on this side of the problem. So I've run national customer service teams. I owned the order to cash process, implemented SAP. So one thing that is really clear is that this issue that's happening in businesses, it's not a data problem. Every one of these businesses has lots of data. They've got more data than they know what to do with. It's really a process and an access problem. The knowledge exists. It's just that the people can't get to it in the right kind of time frame to be able to make any credible change and change to that outcome. So the outcome for OG and Abbey is that we are able to deliver those personalised, actionable sales insights. So it provides recommendations, the so what. What do I do with the information I have? What's the most important thing to do? What are the nice to do things? What should I be actioning today versus next week, and so on. And the other thing is that it's an automated knowledge pipeline. So it just keeps producing day in, day out. The data comes in, the information goes out. There's no manual feeding in of information. So it helps that whole customer engagement, speeds that process up and gets the information to the people that need it quickly. But as we said, they're personalized. So what your sales team might see is different to what your executive team might see. And when we set the system up, we really specifically design that to be specific to those roles. And one of the things that we do know about data is that too much or a lot is not always a good thing. You need to be focused on the things that turn the dial. So just heaps of data doesn't change anything. It's making sure that it's focused and that is addressing the issues that the business wants to deal with. So if we look at the bottom, you know, we've successfully deployed in an enterprise manufacturing business that's proven in live operations. So it's not a pilot or a sandbox. It is a live system that's working. And most importantly, it's given us a foundation that we can use the engine in a whole lot of different ways. And particularly in Abby, we're already talking about what are the next steps. So how can we support forecasting, how we can support their operations. So they can see that information there. And that last point is more of a commercial one. And in some other slides further on, Scott will kind of come back and address those commercial side of things.
Yeah, cool. So there really isn't a market for sovereign AI at the moment. There's no product category. It's not something that people ever thought of. So I was trying to find a market that was comparable. So I needed to find something that I could say, look, it's kind of a bit like this and it's a bit like this, but this is kind of a reference market. And the market that I picked was enterprise performance management. And when you look at that market, that enterprise performance management market, it's about a $10 billion market and it's growing at 10%. Now, I actually believe the market is much bigger than that because EPM solutions generally don't touch mid-sized companies. They're priced out of it. These things are ridiculously expensive, and a lot of medium-sized companies don't even know that these products exist or don't even know that they could value them because they're so expensive. So certainly IBM Planning Analytics has never really addressed the mid-market. It's purely enterprise and at that high-end enterprise place. But we know that CFOs are spending big money on budgeting, forecasting, planning solutions already. But what they're doing today is they're buying all those services as SaaS products on the cloud. So I believe once we move that from the cloud back onto device, the unit costs of those solutions will decrease considerably. And that's going to drive significantly more and new customers entering that market because for the first time, they're able to buy solutions that are not $1 million solutions, but something, you know, much more competitively priced and much more available to them. So in terms of competition, as I mentioned, it kind of, the Kiraa solution is kind of a mix of all of these things. It's kind of a mix of business intelligence, things like your dashboarding tools, your data warehouses, all that sorts of things that are trying to aggregate information and present visualizations and dashboards to people. It's a little bit like the enterprise performance management, understanding, modeling the potentials, forecasting. It's a little bit like what you have in some of your ERPs that are trying to provide insights to people from inside their ERPs. And it's a little bit like the ChatGPTs or the Claudes that are trying to provide general purpose information. So Kiraa kind of overcomes the limitations of all those 4 different product categories. And the way that it does that is that obviously business intelligence is really all about presenting what happened, but you know, the cost of developing dashboards and individual reports is too much. So a lot of times in organizations, you end up getting generic dashboards and generic solutions because they're just too expensive to develop something for every single person. Then we talked about enterprise performance management. A lot of companies, even like OG and Abby, they still do all their budgeting on, which means their budgeting is quite limited. They're not sort of doing down to the product level or the customer level or the paper grade level. They just don't have the sophisticated tools to do that next level of analysis and forecasting. And then, of course, you've got your ERPs and a lot of really good stuff happening in the ERP space. But the problem is that those are silos. So the ERP will be great for everything inside the ERP, but it won't touch the CRM, it won't touch the contract management system, it won't touch all these other systems. So yeah, so people end up having to go into other places, which is then, you know, frustrating because then you've got one system doesn't talk to the other one. And then, of course, the promise was that these cloud AI assistants would be able to come in and provide that information for people. But, you know, you've then got the risk of exposing your confidential data. You've got you got context drift. You don't know if the answers are relevant to you or they're just generic. So the way that I see Kiraa competes with all of these, but probably more towards that mid-sized market where they don't have very sophisticated tools yet at all. So I think we can effectively replace a lot of all of these four, and instead of organizations spending fortunes on dashboarding tools, we would say your better option might be to use the Kiraa solution, because it provides you the business intelligence, the enterprise performance management, gives you the AI, and it's also consolidates information from across your different solutions. So that's how we see ourselves being positioned against the competitors. And then, of course, because we're on device, we've got the angle to say, look, these insights are sovereign. The model is yours. You're not training someone else's model or exposing confidential data.
Yeah, so we've spoken about the problem, the product, and how we are where we are. So what's Kiraa's path to scalable growth? Well, it's across three areas. We've got one engine, three levers, each is bigger than the other. Direct to customer, where we're mainly playing at the moment, it's a managed service, high value user case, highest touch. And ultimately with your own team, it's the lowest scale. But it's where you learn. It's where you actually work with clients to understand what's their needs, how do you help them solve their problems, and how do you actually work with them to drive productivity. And a great example is sales intelligence. Lots of organizations have large sales force, but many of them sit in the office where they're actually doing lots of the administration elements, going through CRM, looking at the reports. Kiraa actually facilitates them to spend more time out on the road, to actually be in front of customers where true sales are undertaken, because of its speed and the insights and the intelligence that it provides them. Direct to customer for us is also about working on financial analytics, manufacturing analytics, procurement, and many others. And already the OG Abbey organization has said to us, can you look at forecasting? We've been using a tool for some 20 years. Could you use the Kiraa engine to be able to take that data and actually manage our paper forecasting moving forward? And that's the beauty of Kiraa in regards to one engine can do many elements across the customer's requirements. Then there's channel partners, one-to-many white label partners brands using their sales force and relationships. Ultimately, it helps you reach more people and it helps you actually grow both your partner's business and your own, and using that technology. And then thirdly is around technology partners. Licensing, this model basically has no ceiling, and it can go into any particular area as well. And the revenue doesn't stop. It's really about being a function of how many people we employ. By using channel and license, we get greater reach. We utilize others' relationships, and that we grow together. And that's a key component for us. So today we're mostly focused in the direct to customer. We're in early conversations within the channel partners and licensing technology, and a couple of you on this call today. And the funding is to help us move across that growth path. So this is about a community. It's about you. Where Kiraa is building a community. 34,000 subscribers in a very short period of time, 3 million views, 60 plus countries, and over 600 expressions of interest. We've never bought an ad during this process. For a company like ours, the hardest thing isn't building the product. It's getting senior executives in businesses to take our call. Enterprise software companies burn enormous capital solving that, and many solve it quite poorly. We didn't solve it with a marketing budget. We solved it by being consistent in our messaging building an audience and talking about things that industry want to hear. So people are now really listening. So I just want to thank you for that. Our customers have found us. Partners have found us. Apple has directly found us, and there have been a number of discussions directly with Apple senior executives. So this has all been initiated through watching YouTube or communication on LinkedIn. The asset and the community isn't an asset. It isn't a subscriber count. It's actually our pipeline to what our future looks like and who we work with and how do we grow our organization.
So I guess the obvious question is, why doesn't someone else do this? And I guess the obvious answer is because I was ridiculously early. I've been talking about this for years even before ChatGPT, when the Apple series chips came out years ago, I realized very quickly that this is where AI was going to go before the world got obsessed with chatbots. So I was already well and truly on this path. So, what stops someone else doing it? Well, we've got a bit of a head start, probably about 3 years, because I've been working on this for so long. We're on to the 4th generation of the algorithm. So our Abby implementation uses the latest Kiraa version 4 algorithm. So I guess it's also hard being early, because you've got to do a lot of work convincing customers that you've got something different, which is really the main reason why we set up the YouTube channel in the first place, because I was finding that we would get so far down a discussion, then someone would say, but ChatGPT can do this. So there was a huge education piece that we needed to do, because people were all sort of suckered in by the hype. But we'd come up with this idea years ago, and we'd already started moving it. So we've solved problems that people aren't even aware of yet. And because we've been doing this for so long, we've really accelerated the speed of our engine. Things that would take days now take minutes. It's an enormous uplift in speed that we've had because we've been doing this for a couple of years. Probably the moat for that is that we had developed this technology called the analytical data frame, which is where we developed our patent application. So I've been working with an Australian university to get that patent so that's now in examination. We believe you have a strong case of getting that patent, which means we've got effectively exclusive use over that for 20 years to calculate our AI in a way that no one else has done before. But the other thing is also the actual engine itself. So, the things that we can't patent is all around the software engine that we've built. We've learned how to use the Apple technology in ways that, that people don't think about it that obviously. So a lot of people talk about Python, and Python is kind of the language everyone uses. I've built a solution that doesn't use Python. It doesn't use SQL. It relies on metal shaders and matrix multiplication. So it's a really advanced way to do data analytics, which is very different to what people think about today. But it's really come from my experience using mainframes and thinking about analytics in not the traditional way, but in terms of how do I use or leverage the Apple silicon to its absolute maximum. And that's kind of the proprietary engine is around how do we configure this so we get absolutely the most possible performance out of Apple silicon, GPU, neural engine, that sorts of things. The other thing is probably the other moat that you don't often see in small startups is ISO. And this is really to Dina's credit here. She helped us get this ISO certification, which might feel like overkill at the moment, but the disciplines and the processes that we've put in place from that ISO have been enormously valuable. They've taken an immature organization and given us a mature set of processes and governance that we now work through. So that's been an enormous amount of work, but it's been very valuable because we see the ISO not just being something that we have to do, we see it as something that we wanted to do. So we learned how to engineer our business processes around what looks like best practices. So, we're also looking at a couple of other standards that are interesting that we might also implement in the next year or two, in terms of around the standard on SOC 2, but also around some of the AI ISO standards as well. And then the final point is around the trade secrets and contracts. So a lot of this business, particularly in the enterprise space, is around relationships. So, we've spent a lot of time fostering relationships, making sure that we understand customers' needs, and they trust us, we trust them. So it's about choosing to work with the right kind of people who are values aligned. They see the world the same way that we do. And then, partnering with them to make sure that we understand their problems and find solutions which address that. So Sort of all those things together is what we would call our moat or our unfair advantage. And we think that really sets us up extremely well to be the category leader in sovereign AI, simply because we realize this existed before anyone else did. And we want to move quickly now to capitalize on that opportunity that we've created. So out of that, as I mentioned, we've had an enormous amount of inbound interest. So, all of the things that we've achieved on the left, we're getting sales intelligence was where we started, but, we're getting a lot of inbound requests around executive diagnostics. How can we do a health check over my company? Look at the metrics. Tell me what you see that I could do differently. Data mining, companies sits on vast pools of data that they never even look at. They don't analyze customer complaints with any detail. They don't look at their production. Production's a great one. They don't look at their production data and try to improve processes. A lot of interest out of air gap solutions as well. So air gap solutions, meaning solutions that are not connected to the internet. For example, mining sites, remote locations, agriculture, defense, government, all these use cases we never even considered, but they're coming thick and fast as well. Also basic stuff like business process automation. A lot of businesses say, look, I love what you're doing with AI, but to be honest, could you just fix up my basic processes? Because half my team is spending days copying, pasting numbers from one spreadsheet to another. Can you fix that up first? And then we'll talk about some of the really high-end analytics as well. Scott, do you want to talk about the next steps?
Yeah, sure. At this stage of a company, the only real evidence about the future track record is really about what we've done in the past. Anyone can write the key elements about what you're going to do next, but very few businesses or teams can actually outline what they actually outlined they would do in the 12 months and actually deliver it. And on the left-hand side, that's exactly what we did. We went through, gradual process, a learning process, and we've achieved all those things. That now facilitates us to really move forward over the next 12 to 24 months about expanding our customer base, both in manufacturing, industrials, and add the additional intelligence models like manufacturing intelligence, financial, overall operations, supply chain, procurement. It'll allow us to actually continue to develop and strengthen partnerships to be able to really move forward with those around the globe and continue our international development and working with technology partners as well as, sales partners to be able to drive that to move forward.
Okay, so we talk a lot about the Kiraa community, and I think it is important to acknowledge that not a lot of businesses create communities around them and have people who have strong interest in what they're doing and how they do it and their success. And all of you on this call are part of that community, and we really appreciate that. And what we're hearing from that community is that the market is ready for something different. So we are going into our crowdsourced funding raise, and that is due to start early in August. The intention there is that we're looking to raise at a maximum, and this is in Australian dollars, so 1.68 million is what we're looking to raise as the maximum. And we've put up here what the use of those funds are, and you can see that we're focusing on that first line, the success. So we are all about making sure our customers are successful. Their success will breed our success, and we intend to be, to spend time and money in making sure that when we deliver to customers, that outcome is successful. We are not we don't want to be in the business of where we deliver a solution and then we walk away and leave customers to it. We want to make sure they get the best out of the solution. We also know that once customers start using it, for example, like Abby, they themselves will find all these multiple opportunities of, okay, what if I could run that over this? What if I could use it in this area? So that customer connection is, and the successful onboarding is very important to us. Scale, looking at our R&D, making sure that we are continuing to develop new products. And as both Errol and Scott have said, we've got a lot of interest coming from a lot of different industries. So some of it is repeatable with what we're doing now, sales intelligence, financial intelligence, that kind of thing. But there is lots of bespoke things as well in that, those air gap solutions and things like that, that we need the R&D for that. And then also our sales and marketing. So making sure that we are sourcing the right customers, the right people to work with. Again, when we talk community, we want to make sure that, both from an investor point of view, from a customer point of view, from a partner point of view, those people that we're working with are the right people for us and we're the right people for them. There's offer costs in there, which are the cost of running a compliant public raise, which is, in Australia, it is highly complex. It's taking lots of time to make sure we get that right. And, one of our restrictions and things we need to be very careful of is that we do have a lot of international interest, and, we can't advertise broadly internationally, where the process then around that investment is making sure that people who are looking to invest are coming to us and asking that, rather than us advertising broadly. Yes, obviously there's lots of restrictions. So these sessions are to provide people with information, and then, if people are interested, we can take next steps from there. Again, thank you all for participating. It's been a great session, and I really look forward to talking to you all a bit more.